The coffee shop near my apartment wasn't anything special. A narrow room with mismatched chairs, the kind where the ceiling fans spin slower than they should. I liked it because nobody expected anything from me there. Just a cup of burnt-tasting coffee, a corner table, and the sound of the grinder filling in the silence. That afternoon, I sat with my notebook open but empty. I'd been meaning to write down a list of things I needed to do: laundry, rent, a call back to my mother, but I just stared at the blank page instead. That was when I noticed her. She was at the counter, ordering tea. Mid-40s maybe, hair pinned back like she had tried once this morning and then never checked again. She wasn't dressed up, just a gray sweater and jeans, but there was something about the way she carried herself, unhurried, like she knew the world would bend to her rhythm. I'd seen her before. Not here, though. She lived across from me. A quiet neighbor, the kind who parked in the same spot every night, and sometimes waved when our timing lined up. I never thought much about it until now, watching the way her fingers tapped lightly on the counter while she waited for her drink. "Hey," she said suddenly, turning. "You live on Willow Street, don't you?" It took me half a beat longer than it should have to answer. "Yeah. Right across from you." Her smile was small but direct. "Thought so. Funny running into you here." I shrugged, trying to play casual, but my pen spun nervously between my fingers. "Guess the neighborhood only has so many places that serve halfway decent coffee." She glanced at my empty notebook. "Looks like you're working hard." I felt the corner of my mouth lift. "You caught me. This is highly productive procrastination." That earned a short laugh from her, low and real. She didn't say more, just nodded as if she understood something about me that I hadn't admitted. Then the barista called her order, and she collected her cup. She hesitated a moment, standing there like she might say goodbye, but instead she pulled out the chair across from me. "Mind if I sit?" I shook my head. We didn't talk much at first. Just the occasional exchange about the music playing, or the ridiculous price of muffins. Mostly it was the quiet between us that stayed, not uncomfortable, just present. I caught myself noticing the way she folded the paper sleeve around her cup, creasing it carefully down the sides as if it needed straightening. My eyes flicked to her hands more than once, before I forced them back to my coffee. At some point, my phone buzzed. A half-written text to a friend still sat unsent. I slid the phone face down on the table. "You come here often?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "It's easier than being home." She studied me, then gave a small nod, like she knew what I meant without me having to spell it out. When she finally stood, it felt abrupt, though she hadn't rushed. She set her cup down, her sleeve perfectly folded, and looked at me with that same quiet directness. "Your trouble," she said softly, almost like she was testing how the words sounded in the air between us. I should have laughed it off. Should have said something forgettable. Instead, the words left my mouth before I could check them. "Only for the right person." She held my gaze for a long second. Long enough that I felt my chest tighten. Then she turned, leaving with a simple nod. I thought that was it, just a strange little moment in a coffee shop. Until, 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A message. From an unknown number. "You forgot your neighbor still knows where you live." And underneath it, a smiley face. She showed up on my porch the next evening, holding a casserole dish wrapped in foil. "I made too much," she said, shifting her weight like she wasn't sure if I'd actually take it. I almost laughed. It felt too on the nose, the neighborly gesture, the excuse that wasn't really an excuse. But I just stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in. You'll save me from eating instant noodles again." Inside, I cleared a stack of textbooks off the table while she set the dish down. The silence between us wasn't the same as the coffee shop. Here, in my living room, it felt closer. Denser. "Smells good," I said, peeling the foil. "Don't get your hopes up. It's just baked pasta." I grabbed 2 forks without thinking. We ate standing up in the kitchen, the way people do when they're not sure if this is dinner together or just a taste test. She laughed when I burned my tongue, and for a moment it felt almost ordinary. "Been here long?" I asked. "5 years," she said. "Moved after the divorce." She didn't look at me when she said it, just focused on scooping another forkful. The word divorce lingered heavier than anything else we'd shared so far. I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. Instead, I admitted something I hadn't planned to. "I don't really know anyone here. Most days it's just class, work, then back home. Doesn't leave much room for anything else." She studied me quietly, like she was weighing the shape of my loneliness against her own. "That sounds familiar," she said after a pause. "Different reasons, same, quiet." We didn't say much after that. Just the clink of forks against the dish. But there was something in the way we avoided each other's eyes that said more than words would have. Later, she rinsed the dish in my sink like she'd done it 100 times. I leaned against the counter, watching the sleeves of her sweater roll up just above her elbows. The sight made me think about things I shouldn't, about how easy it would be to let a moment slip too far, how dangerous it could be if I did. When she handed me the clean dish, our fingers brushed. Quick, unplanned. But it froze me in place. She didn't pull back immediately. Just let her hand linger against mine, the barest pressure, like a test. Then she drew away, drying her hands on a towel. "Thanks for helping me not waste dinner," she said softly. I nodded, throat dry. At the door, she hesitated before stepping out. The porch light haloed her hair, and for the first time I noticed how tired her eyes looked when she wasn't smiling. I wanted to say something to keep her there, a question, a joke, anything. But the words stayed caught. She looked at me one last time, not smiling, just holding me with her eyes. And then she said, "Good night, Trouble." The door closed, and the silence that followed was louder than anything we'd said. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next time wasn't planned. It never really was. I'd stopped at the mailbox on my way back from class, shuffling through junk ads, when her voice came from behind me. "Long day?" She stood there in running shoes, earbuds tangled in her hand, her face still flushed from a jog. Different than the coffee shop, different than my kitchen. More unguarded. "Yeah," I said, awkwardly stuffing envelopes under my arm. "You?" She shrugged. "Trying to outrun myself. Doesn't work, but it passes the time." Her words hit sharper than she meant, I think. I didn't know what to say, so I just followed as she walked back toward her porch. She motioned for me to sit on the steps with her. I did. The evening was cooling, streetlights humming faintly as they clicked on. We didn't talk much. Just the sound of a car passing now and then, and her steady breathing next to me. At some point, she pulled a water bottle from beside her and offered it. I hesitated before taking a sip, the plastic still warm from her hand. When I handed it back, our fingers almost touched again. Almost. Then the sound of a door creaked open across the street. One of my housemates stepped onto the porch, spotted us, and raised a brow. He didn't say anything, just smirked, muttered, "Evening," and went back inside. Still, it was enough. She shifted, pulling her knees closer, suddenly aware of how it looked. "People talk," she murmured, not quite meeting my eyes. I wanted to say I didn't care. That nothing was happening. That everything was happening. But all I managed was, "Yeah." The silence that followed was heavy. Not the comfortable kind this time. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. "This is probably not smart." I nodded, though it felt like agreeing to something I didn't want. And yet she didn't get up. Neither did I. We sat there until the sky darkened, both of us half leaning into the quiet, half pulling away from it. Every shift of her hand caught my eye. Every pause in her breath made me think she might say something more. Finally, she did. Softly. "You remind me of being 20 again. And that scares me more than I thought it would." Her words hung between us, fragile. My chest tightened, but I didn't move closer. I just let them settle. "I'm not." I started, then stopped. I wasn't sure what I was trying to say. "Not that young? Not that harmless? Not that temporary? She looked at me then. Really looked. And for a split second, her face leaned just slightly toward mine. The porch light flickered. A car horn blared down the street. The spell broke before it began. She pulled back first, pressing the cap onto her water bottle too tightly. I should go inside. I nodded, forcing a smile I didn't feel. Good night. But when she closed the door behind her, the ghost of that almost moment stayed. The space between us had narrowed, and it terrified me how badly I wanted to cross it. It happened on a Thursday evening. Not planned, not special, just one of those dusks where the light fades slower than you expect. I found her sitting on the bench at the corner park, a book closed on her lap. She didn't notice me at first. Her head tilted slightly upward, eyes half lost in the branches above. You're hiding, I said, half a joke, half too honest. She startled, then smiled faintly. Or maybe just avoiding my own kitchen. I sat down beside her. The bench was narrow, our shoulders almost touching. The air between us hummed with cicadas. For a while, we talked about nothing, the neighbor's barking dog, the heat wave, the book in her lap she swore she'd been reading for months. But beneath every word was something heavier. I saw it when she glanced at me too long. Heard it in the way her laugh cut short, like she'd remembered herself. Then, out of nowhere, she said, My son's friend was over earlier. He saw me wave at you the other day. Asked if I was, you know. She trailed off, biting at the inside of her cheek. You know what? I asked, though my chest already knew. Interested. The word came out too sharp, like she hated how it sounded. I sat back, forcing a dry chuckle. And what did you say? That he shouldn't assume things. She paused. Even if he wasn't wrong to notice. The silence after that was unbearable. My pulse loud in my ears, her hands tightening around the book. You think this is wrong? I asked finally, voice low. She didn't answer right away. Just stared ahead at the kids playing in the distance, their laughter drifting across the grass. I think, she said slowly, that I like sitting here with you more than I should. And I don't know what to do with that. Her honesty landed heavier than any rejection could. I felt it sink into me, pulling me closer. My hand twitched on the bench between us, not touching hers but close enough to know how easy it would be. You don't have to do anything, I said. We can just sit. But the truth slipped out in the quiet that followed. I don't want to just sit. Her breath caught, soft but audible. She turned toward me then, her eyes searching mine, not for words, but for a line she already knew she was crossing. For one suspended moment, nothing else existed. Just the tilt of her head, the way her lips parted slightly as if to speak, the narrowing space between us. I could feel the question in the air, unspoken but undeniable. How much further are we willing to go? The next week, she wasn't there. No wave when I came home. No porch light catching her silhouette. The bench at the park sat empty, the book she'd claimed to be reading nowhere in sight. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People get busy. Schedules shift. But by the third day, I found myself walking slower past her house, waiting for the sound of her front door, scanning for her car in the driveway. When she finally appeared, it wasn't like before. She was carrying grocery bags, phone pressed to her ear, face drawn tight. She caught my eye for the briefest second, then looked away, sliding inside with a hurried turn of the lock. I stood there longer than I should have, the air heavy with something unsaid. That night, a half-empty glass of water sat untouched on my table as I scrolled my phone. No new messages. I thought about sending one. Hey, everything okay? But the screen stayed blank. My thumb hovered, then dropped the phone face down. The silence stretched. 2 days later, I saw her again. This time she was sitting in her car, engine off, staring at the steering wheel. I slowed as I passed, but she didn't notice. Or maybe she did and just didn't want to. Later, I heard it from my housemate, casually thrown over dinner. Your neighbor's kid's back in town, right? Saw him moving bags in yesterday. Must have been a surprise. The words clattered inside me, sharp and sudden. A son. Back under her roof. Of course. That explained the closed-off glances, the distance. And yet it didn't ease the knot in my chest. When I saw her again, she smiled, but it wasn't the same. A polite, practiced smile. The kind you give strangers at the store. Everything all right? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Yeah, she said too quickly. Just more people around the house. Things to take care of. I nodded, though the weight of it pressed hard. She shifted her grocery bag higher on her arm, as if the load was heavier than it looked. There was a pause where she could have said more. Where I could have asked? Neither of us did. That night I typed out a message. I miss sitting with you. Even when we said nothing, it felt like something. I read it twice. 3 times. The words felt both too much and not enough. I left it sitting in the box, glowing faintly against the dark room. Then I deleted it. The phone went dark in my hand. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. And the space between us, once fragile and electric, now felt like an unanswered question left hanging in the air. It was late when I heard the knock. Not loud. 2 soft taps against the door. When I opened it, she stood there with her arms folded, no coat, hair pulled back in a messy knot. She looked like she hadn't planned it, like she'd walked across the street before she could talk herself out of it. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. Inside, the air was heavy with whatever she hadn't said in days. She leaned against the counter while I stood by the sink, distance stretched like a wire. I'm sorry I've been disappearing, she said finally. It's complicated. I waited. My son, she added, eyes fixed on the floor. He doesn't understand. I don't even understand half the time. But it feels. She stopped, searching for a word she didn't want to admit. It feels like I'm being pulled somewhere I shouldn't go. I swallowed, hands tightening around the edge of the sink. You mean me? Her silence was answer enough. I wanted to say it didn't matter. That we could ignore the rules people would place on us. But the truth clung to the walls between us. She was older. She carried history. I was younger. Maybe reckless. Still, I couldn't keep it in anymore. I don't care how it looks. I don't care if it makes no sense. I just know I look for you. Every day. Even when I tell myself not to. She let out a shaky laugh, small and painful. You shouldn't say things like that. But it's true. Her hands gripped the counter now, the same way mine did. Like we were both bracing for a fall. I can't promise you anything, she whispered. Not forever. Not even tomorrow. I can't be that for you. I'm not asking you to be, I said. I'm just asking for. My voice faltered, then steadied. This. Right now. The silence after that was unbearable and tender all at once. She pressed her eyes shut, shoulders tight, then finally exhaled as if letting go of a fight she'd been holding too long. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but her face was steady. She stepped closer. Not all the way, just enough that the air shifted. Her hand brushed against mine on the counter. A touch so light it could have been an accident, except she didn't pull away. I turned my palm slowly, letting her fingers slide into mine. No words. No declarations. Just the smallest, fragile tether between us. She gave me a faint, tired smile. Not hopeful. Not hopeless. Just real. Okay, she whispered. That was all. And somehow, it was enough. Time didn't rush. It stretched. Days into weeks, weeks into months. We didn't talk about what happened that night in my kitchen, the hand that lingered, the word okay hanging between us. We just slipped back into routines. Separate but not. Some mornings, I'd see her walking to her car at 8:47 a.m. sharp, coffee thermos tucked under her arm. She'd glance across the street and lift her hand in a half-wave, the kind that lasted a second too long to be casual. I'd raise my mug back, steam curling in the air between us. Other nights, I'd find her at the park bench again, book unopened in her lap. I'd sit beside her, sometimes with tea, sometimes with black coffee, and we wouldn't fill the silence. We didn't need to. Little by little, the fear that used to edge every glance softened. We weren't hiding. We weren't announcing. We were just living. One evening, she invited me in to fix a dripping faucet. It was nothing, a small task, a few minutes under the sink, but when I stood up, water on my hands, she passed me a towel like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her son had gone back to his apartment across town, and the house felt calmer, warmer. "You're getting good at this," she said, nodding toward the sink. "Guess I'm useful for more than eating baked pasta," I replied. She laughed, really laughed, the way she had in the coffee shop that first day. And the sound stayed with me long after. There was no grand confession, no dramatic moment where everything was declared. It unfolded slowly, in the small ways. A grocery bag carried inside. A thermos filled for two. My textbooks spread across her kitchen table while she worked on her laptop across from me. The distance that once felt dangerous had simply dissolved. One night, much later, we found ourselves back on the porch steps. Same hum of cicadas, same faint glow of streetlights. She leaned against me, her shoulder pressing into mine like it belonged there. After a long silence, she said, "Do you ever think about that first coffee?" "All the time," I admitted. Her smile curved softly. "You were trouble. Only for the right person," I reminded her. She shook her head, but her hand found mine anyway, fingers fitting like they had been waiting for that moment all along. The street was quiet, the night cool. Nothing dramatic. Just a small truth finally lived in the open. I didn't need more. She didn't either. And as the minutes stretched, I realized life hadn't given us a perfect story. But it had given us this. Something warm. Something grounded. Something ours. A story nobody else would notice, except for the way we looked at each other across a cup of coffee, or at 8:47 a.m., or on an old park bench. And maybe that was the only ending we needed. 3.